welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of an absolutely lovely, delightful, delicious rom-com. It is one of the most affirming reads I've had this year, and it's a good year for affirming reads. And I'm so excited to talk about this book. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, well, my name is Maria J. Morillo, and my book is called EX-PERIMENTO, which is a rom-com set in Caracas, Venezuela, which is where I'm from. I'm from Venezuela, and it follows Maria Antonieta Camacho, who is a journalist, as she follows a list of items or experiments in order to get her ex-boyfriend back. The list doesn't work until her favorite musician hops in and coaches her through the whole process. Obviously, they end up falling in love, and it's all very swoony, very cute, very sweet.
It is so sweet, and I really love the slow burn and the really fun dynamic between them. But before I talk too much about the book, I'd love to ask you a little bit about your career and your journey as a writer. I'm
Mhm.
particularly interested in how I know that you teach ESL and you do translation. Do you think those things influenced you as a writer too?
I think those things helped me a lot in terms of grammar because I had to study grammar and I have to, in order to teach grammar and writing itself. That helped me a lot. I think that helped me practice a lot. ESL also helped me kind of loosen up a little bit when it comes to talking because before I started teaching ESL, I would very much not speak English because I didn't have anybody to speak English with. I knew that I spoke English. I knew that I could hold a conversation in English. I just never practiced. So I was also very, very shy in terms of being like, oh, hello, how are you? I would be paralyzed. I would not do that. But teaching ESL, I had to speak English in order to help those kids learn English. So it helped me loosen up a lot. And translation also helped me a lot because I had to be immersed in English all the time, more than I already was. Because I do love the language. I think it's so great that languages help us communicate with each other, even though we're from different cultures and different backgrounds and different everything. Like if you learn a language different than your own, like you can just hop onto another culture and learn their way of lives, the way they do everything, the way they see the world. And I think that is so cool. So I love that. I've always loved English because of that, and because so many people speak English. So maybe you can go to, I don't know, Sweden, and you don't have to speak Swedish because they will probably speak English. So I think it's so cool that you can do that. So it did help me a lot in that sense, and it helped me a lot in that I met a lot of people through that because I'm also a very shy person, and like social interactions do not come well for me. So that prepared me, that did prepare me for the journey. That prepared me to have the call with agents because I would not have been able to do that had I not been teaching English for a year and having to speak English for a year with other people. So it did help me a lot.
That's so interesting, because I used to teach too before libraries, and I
Mhm.
always like to say that the fastest way to learn something is to have to teach it,
Yeah,
another person.
that is so true.
Yeah. So for the book, what was the beginning point for you? Was it a character? Was it the city? Was it a particular romantic vibe you were looking for? Where did it all begin?
It began after my first book, like the book that got me my agent. That book died on top. And my agent said, why don't you write something set in Venezuela? So that was like I knew that whatever I was going to write next was going to be set here. So from that point, I was just like looking for a story that would work here and that wouldn't feel like maybe foreign to other people because you it's great that you get to show another country, but you're also like you have a target audience, you know? And I was trying to publish in the US. I wasn't trying to publish here. So it's like, how can I write a story that will resonate, you know, to a US audience, to other Latin American countries that are in Venezuela, but also to the millions of Venezuelans who are outside of the country and those who are inside the country as well. So the first thing was that it's going to be set in Venezuela, but how can I tell the story? And the next thing that happened when I landed on this story in particular was that I was watching an interview with, you know, a Venezuelan icon, much like Marianto's mom. And that was the first spark of an idea because I thought, what would it be like to grow up under, you know, the shadow of someone who is so beloved and so big and so important? And that's how Marianto came to be. And then Simon came to be because I was listening to this Colombian band that I like a lot, and they all write love songs, and I love their songs. And I thought, man, these guys would be great at giving love advice because, you know, the songs, like if they can write songs like this, like they understand love, they would be great at giving love advice. So that's how the story of, you know, her favorite singer who writes about love and who sings about love comes in to give her love advice, even though she gives love advice to people. So I merged those two ideas, and the experimento came out. That was how it came to be.
I love that. And I love, the experimento itself. First off, the whole beginning of this book for poor Marianto is so an extended humiliation
Yeah,
ritual. I feel so bad for
yeah.
her. Could you talk a little bit about where she finds herself at the beginning of this book and maybe what went into coming up with the experimento and like what she has to do?
Well, I had to Google a lot. I was like, what do people do? Like, you know, those articles on like Elle or People or Cosmopolitan, and like how to get your ex back. And, you know, they were very, very much like Simon's list and not so much like Marianta's list. But I wanted to write a rom-com and they needed to be funny. So I was like, well, they have to be ridiculous. And they have to be stuff that, you know, that girls do. Like some of this stuff I've done, not to get an X back, but to like, you know, have somebody notice you. I remember in high school, I would like fake text my crush and be like, oh, sorry, that wasn't for you. But it was just to call his attention, you know, to like kind of start a conversation. So, and I know like now I think about it, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the feeling that I wanted her to have because we, you know, when we're in love, I think we're very, very delusional as to what we think might work and what we think might not work. So for her, it was like, well, he's going to fall in love with me again. If you know, if I remind him of our entire relationship, or if I make him feel like I'm mad because he has to come and save me, or if I'm just like in his radar all the time, if I'm not around, he's going to forget me. And you know, all these things, you know, from the female brain, it's like, you know, they might work. I have to be around and I have to chase him and I have to do this. And sometimes I'm saying this because I've done this. We think that if he sees us more, you know, he's going to remember and he's going to, you know, he's like, oh yeah, I love her. How could I have forgotten that I love her? And it doesn't work like that. Like most of the time, that just pushes the guy further away. It's like, whoa. So for her to have like all these experiments and for them to be like one is more ridiculous than the other was, you know, I just was trying to make it funny and for it to not be that serious because, you know, there's one thing that you can be like, oh, poor her, poor Marianto, she's going through all of this, you know, without making us women or men or anybody who has gone through, you know, extreme lengths in order to get somebody's attention, to make them feel bad, like, oh, I've done this and it's so bad. I didn't want to do that either because I've been there. But at the beginning of the book, when she starts the experimentos, she is very much sure that this is going to work because her plans always work. And, you know, they have a 4 year long relationship. It's not like a 1 month long situationship. Like they were solid. He was her boyfriend. He was her future. So for her to go to these lengths for what she thinks is the love of her life is like completely normal. Like I'm going to do everything I can in order to get him back. And she's a little bit desperate because her entire life just was turned upside down from, in a span of like 12 hours. So, she's a little bit unhinged. People have picked up on it. Like I've seen, the reviews that people tag me in. They're like, it was so cringy. It was so this. Like I feel so bad for her. That was the point because she's acting unhinged. She's acting a little bit crazy. She's doing way too much, and it's not working for her. So, at the beginning of the book, she's like that. She's a little bit desperate in order to get her old life back and her life back on track because that's all she knows. Like that's all she wants. Also, she wants security. She wants to know to be sure of what is going to happen next. She wants to have control of what happens next. So for her to like create a plan and to kind of take him back to the way the relationship started, or to be in his radar, or to be chasing him all the time. It's like, well, this worked before because that's the dynamic of our relationship. Like I want to fix what you say was broken, but also I want to remind you of the good things or the good moments that we have. But he wasn't the man for her, so it doesn't work out.
Yeah, it's really interesting the journey that she goes on, because she has a very intense need for control over her
Yeah.
life. And she has plans for everything, and she's very emotionally attached to those plans, maybe more than
Mm-hmm.
she thought she was. And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a paradox that she has to gain control by letting go of it a little bit, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have to learn to go with the flow, but also balance that active and I don't know if I'm making sense, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Mhm. So could you talk a little bit about Simone and creating their romantic tension? Because I always love that, that balance between what's bringing them together and what's maybe pushing them apart a little bit that creates that
Mm-hmm.
slow burn that I love.
Yeah, well, Simon was always meant to be like the voice of reason from the beginning. He was always meant to be the voice of reason, the grounded one, the one who's like, you're about to make a whole mess. Like this is a train wreck waiting to happen, and I'm gonna stop it. Um, so he was always going to be the voice of reason. I've always wanted him from the beginning. I wanted him to feel very real. I wanted the romance to feel very real. I wanted them to be like, okay, so this is ridiculous in the sense that he's a pop star and it's probably not going to happen to everybody. Like it's not the meet cute that you met at a coffee shop and that was it. Like, or he's a coworker, or he's your neighbor, or like that could happen to me, like a coworker, a neighbor, somebody at the gym, something like for it to be your favorite musician, that adds to the whole. Well, it's a little bit out of over the top, but I did want the relationship to feel very real, in the sense like, look, these are the things that are separating us, and maybe we shouldn't pursue this. Like we're going to acknowledge this. We're going to acknowledge that love is not just a feeling, and just because you feel it, everything is going to be okay. Like you have to take all these other things into account as well. So I always wanted that from Simon. I always wanted him to be like emotionally intelligent. I always wanted him to be like responsible, affectionately is that a word? Responsible. I always wanted him to be like, you know what, this is bad for you right now, so I'm going to take a step back. That's I always like that was always the vision. That was always the idea. So to build a relationship, it had to be a slow burn because she just came out of a 4-year relationship, and if you know Marianto, for me, like it would not have made sense for her to jump from a 4-year relationship that you wanted to get married to this guy to just another one. Like, yeah, there's the chemistry and there's the pool and there's everything, but like she's so guarded and she plans everything so well that it would not have worked otherwise. It would not have been consistent to the character that I knew her to be. And for Simone, who comes from that relationship that he had and ended, it would also not have been consistent with his character. And the men that I wanted him to be like, you're responsible, you're smart, like you know what you're doing, you're grounded. And for him to be like, screw everything, I'm just gonna. So it had to be a slow burn, and it had to be like sort of blooming from a friendship. So I wanted for them to find in each other, that person that they can confide in, that, but also that it's not exactly like you, but it's like you in all the things that matter, but it's different from you, in all the things that you're lacking. So, Simon is very steady, even though his job is, he has to travel the world, he has to do all these things, and it's not the idea of security that she had in her mind, but he helps her loosen up while offering that security. Like, you know what, I'm here. I'm not here physically, but I'm here. And also for her to offer that to him as well. Like you can just be yourself, and I'm not going to hate you or to resent you for, doing the things that you love and being the person that you love. And I'm here as, to support you in any way that I can. So it's something that he lacked. And he also has, things that she lacked, and then they can balance in each other. And that's why I think they worked. But they had to become friends first. Like they had to get to know each other first. And there was this element that she wanted Ale back, and he was helping her get her ex-boyfriend back. So, there was always a barrier that they couldn't cross until what happened.
And
Yeah.
I love, when I love friends to lovers, and I love when that's a slow burn because it makes a lot of sense to me that the
Mhm.
friendship itself can be an obstacle to the romance because they value the friendship so much and they don't want to
Mhm.
risk that, so that's very natural to me that both people would be very hesitant to put something at risk that already seems so good, and they are
Mhm.
both healing on their different journeys. And I love
Yeah.
your point about, I think in young love, we are always excited when the other person is a lot like us.
Mhm.
But as we get older, I think the traits that are not like us that fill in our own blanks, become much more important.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, so the band itself, Caballo de Troya, the
Mhm.
band, you mentioned a Colombian band that may have been, sort of in the DNA, in the building of this band. Can you talk about what goes into like writing music, because you don't have access to the sound, and so what goes into building a band and bringing the experience of music to the page, if that makes sense.
Well, for me personally, I love music. I also sing a little. I play a few instruments. So music is such an integral part of my life that I try to put it in everything. But I think, well, the number one thing is for you to know what they sound like. Okay, so this is a band that I'm making. What do they sound like? They sound similar to this band. For example, the band that I sort of based them on, or that was the inspiration for Caballo de Troya, was this Colombian band called Morat. And they're very, very early records. They're very folky. And that's sort of what Caballo de Troya sounds like. I know they sound folky. I know they sing love songs. I know they sing like ballads, and I know they sing like breakup songs. So that's what I try to do. And also knowing like the the Latin American music scene, because boy bands for us, they don't look exactly the same as boy bands do in the US or the UK. Boy bands are more like the Jonas Brothers, for example, or One Direction. But here, boy bands are, I don't know how to explain it. Well, they're made of boys, obviously, but they sing love songs, and it's so like very passionate, and they have the same fan base, but their songs very much mirror like the culture of the country that they're from. So Morat sounds Colombian, and it sounds like a variety of Colombian artists. And Venezuelan bands, like boy bands, they sound like from the place they come from. So I wanted to put that in order for people to be like, okay, yeah, this is a Latin American band, and I relate to that. because I listen to this type of music. And in describing music, I love that I get to do that. I love that I have the language to do that because I understand music a little bit. And I love that I get to like pull little examples of what Caballo Troya sounds like. So if you look at all the other songs that I mentioned throughout the book, they sort of sound like Caballo Troya if people wanted to go and look for them. I have made a Spotify playlist where there's a lot of Morat, so people know like what Caballo Troya sounds like. But yeah, it's also like what kind of, in my case, because it was a band, like what kind of band do you want to make? Morat, the Colombian band, they're a boy band, but Caballo Troya is not a boy band because they have like Simon's sister is part of the band. So it's like, okay, I want a woman in the band because I have hopes and dreams for the future, but I want a woman in the band. And I was like, okay, I want this, and I want her to play this instrument. And these characters, I have them all mapped out in my head. Like this other singer, this is his personality in case he ever comes up, and the sister, this is her personality in case she ever comes up. And that also kind of makes it easy for me to write Simon and his background and his friends and like the way that he is and the way that he behaves. But yeah, I love writing music. I do.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of joy in the music, and I think that really comes across. It's a very joyful book altogether, I think. Obviously Marianto goes through some really hard things and you feel a lot of embarrassment on her behalf.
Yeah.
But
I've tried a few times. Like, I'm so sorry.
I know.
But I have to.
And sometimes you feel really bad putting them through that. You're like, you don't deserve this, but the plot. So
yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming to talk about this book. I'm so excited to share it with our readers here. What is next for you? Are you writing right now?
I am. Well, I have a 2-book deal with Berkeley, which is really cool. I'm very excited. And I'm writing, my next book is a road trip romance as well, so across Venezuela. It's kind of my take on a road trip romance set in Venezuela. So, this time we only got to see Caracas, and I think we got to see Margarita, if I don't remember incorrect. But with the next book, we're going to see so much of the country because they go everywhere. Ooh. And I wrote the first draft. I had a blast writing the first draft. So I'm on that editing stage right now.
Yay. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so excited to see more of your writing and more of Venezuela on the page. Thank you again for taking the time to talk to us. This has been lovely.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. And thank you, listeners, for joining us. You have your homework. Please check out the Experimento. It is absolutely a great, joyful read. I think you will really, really enjoy it. All right. Thanks for joining us. It is now time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.